The Astral Projection Techniques group on Facebook has skyrocketed to 106,000 members since last year. OBEs have had a lot in common with Edgar Cayce's special skills, including the ability to heal and access the akashic records. Bob has studied and practiced it since 1979 and has written three books on the subject. But he has more books than that, right? Five all told, yeah. So he has no idea what he's talking about today. Come and hear the unique perspective. Today, I know you all will enjoy today's meeting. I've heard Bob a couple of times before. You guys are in for a real treat. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm Bob Peterson, and the first thing I want to do is to thank Mike and Wendy especially, and the A.R.E. group for inviting me to speak here with you today. And I really appreciate it. I hope you guys have as much fun watching my presentation as I did creating it, because I had a lot of fun. So with that said, first thing I want to talk about is what is astral projection for those who don't know. When I'm talking about astral projection, I'm talking about out-of-body experiences. And that is a fully conscious experience in which you seem to be completely separated from your physical body. In other words, your physical body is just another inanimate object in the room. Some background about me. I'm a 40-year career as a computer analyst. I've been a paranormal investigator since 1981 and was doing paranormal investigations since before the first Ghostbusters movie came out. I've been studying and inducing my own out-of-body experiences since 1979, and I've published, as Mike said, I've published 5 books, 3 of which are about OBEs. I'm not an Edgar Cayce scholar or expert, so bear with me on that. Don't ask me any hard Edgar Cayce questions. And the good news, Mercury is no longer in retrograde. It's direct as of today, so we're good. So I don't have to stress over this. So since I'm a computer programmer and a nerd by my very nature, what you're going to find out is that I have a very quirky, computer-ish sense of humor. And so I've got a lot of astral projection related memes and things like that. And I heard a few laughs in the audience when my other thing was going on, my little slideshow of memes was going on. So hopefully that humor will come out here. So my background, I was an ordinary kid for the most part. My mom was Catholic, and so I had to go to church every Sunday. My dad was quote-unquote spiritual, and that means that he didn't go to church with us. I was a science nerd from day one. All the other kids would be, in the school library looking at picture books, and I'd be in the science section reading about dinosaurs and stuff. And my dad had a very small collection of books. He had a little bookshelf, and he had a few books, Native American books, World War II books, Erich von Däniken, the obligatory stuff like that. And you guessed it, Edgar Cayce. He had a few books on Edgar Cayce. So, one day, I was probably about 8 years old, I asked my dad, who was this Edgar Cayce guy? And he said, well, he was a famous psychic. They called him the sleeping prophet. And he went to sleep and somehow woke up with the answers. And how did he get these answers? He supposedly read the akashic records. Sounds pretty unscientific, right? Well, I was a science-oriented kid, so I pretty much blew it off and said, okay, well, I don't need to focus on that guy. That all changed. Fast forward 10 years, 1979 in July, my brother Joe gave my dad a copy of Robert Monroe's book, Journeys Out of the Body. And I was very skeptical, but I asked to read it because it was fascinating to me. And so I read the book. What I liked about Monroe's approach is not only his scientific approach to it, reporting, this is what happened to me, this is what it seemed to be going on. He also said, don't take my word for it, try it for yourself. And he gave a procedure in there, in his book, on how to induce an out-of-body experience. So being a good scientist, I decided to give it a fair shake and follow his procedure as closely as I could, to the letter. So September 9th, 1979, a couple months later, I followed Monroe's procedure to the letter, and I got what they call the vibrations. The vibrations is a precursor to an out-of-body experience, and it literally felt like I was being electrocuted, and it was very scary, and it was very much an awakening. It was like, holy crap, I gotta study this. This is not covered by any science that I knew, and I was 18 at the time. This is not covered by any of the science I knew at the time, and it was definitely not talked about in the Catholic Church. So it didn't fit either of my paradigms. So it really shook my my senses to the core. So from that point on, I knew I had to learn how to induce out-of-body experiences because I couldn't trust what anyone else said about them. I had to find out for myself. Okay, so I started studying astral projection. I tried Monroe's technique again and again and again, and it stopped working for whatever reason. When I finally calmed down enough to be brave enough to try it again. So I tried Monroe's technique and other techniques that I had learned along the way for almost a month. And then on November 2nd, 1979, I had my first fully conscious out-of-body experience. It was very realistic. And it was also one of the strangest out-of-body experiences I've ever had. I had split awareness. My consciousness was split 5 ways.
Wow.
Okay, this is 1979, so I was a lot younger. And actually, this is 5 years later on. I didn't have the mustache back then. I was 18.
That's funny.
Okay, so it was a very bizarre experience, but the bottom line is I floated up to the ceiling and I saw my body down below, and it's like looking at my hands, and I could kind of see through them. It's like, wow, this is really realistic. This is like I'm really there. Okay, so for me it was a spiritual awakening, and what some people may think that the spiritual awakening is like the top picture, but for me it was like the bottom picture, right? Lying in bed saying, I'm not crazy, I'm not crazy, I'm not crazy. Maybe you guys can relate. Nobody gave me a congratulations on your first out-of-body experience. Nobody gave me a card. And as a matter of fact, I thought that I didn't feel comfortable sharing that with any of my family or friends. I did tell my brother, who gave my father the book, Journeys Out of the Body. But I learned very quickly as I started to have more of these experiences that I could tell in their eyes. They thought I was like, yeah, right. You were out of your body. Yeah, right. And it was kind of like a teenager trying to get attention. And so I learned very quickly to stay quiet about it. And instead, I kept the experiences to myself, and I started collecting books on out-of-body experiences. This is my astral projection and out-of-body experience library as of 2015, so it's nearly 10 years old, out of date. I've got quite a few more since then. These are almost all out-of-body and astral projection books. This does not include peripheral topics like remote viewing, near-death experience, any of these other side topics. These are just astral projection books, pretty much. So one of the things I wanted to learn from these books is how do they do it? How do you get into this experience? I wanted to recreate the problem as any scientist would want to studying anything. Got to be able to recreate it. So relaxation, you would relax your body. And I found out it was a special kind of trance that you had to go in. So regular meditation wasn't good enough. Regular kind of trance wasn't good enough, like trance mediumship, whatever. It was a very specific kind of focus on your mind. And there were some people who were able to achieve it through hypnosis, but unfortunately hypnosis only works on like 20 people are real susceptible, and there's a good lot that are not susceptible to hypnosis, and I'm not very susceptible to it, so I'm very resistant. Usually when you're in an astral projection, your body is in sleep paralysis and you dissociate from your physical body. Okay, now another thing these books talked about is different planes of existence. Okay, they leave their body and they experience multiple planes of existence, and even the astral plane they claimed was split up into different levels. right? At the lowest level, you have these unsavory looking creatures and whatever. And at the higher levels, you've got, very, they are very heaven-like. Okay, and some of these books, many of these books actually said that you can, with astral projection, you can access the akashic records, right? And there's lots of good examples, like Preston Dennett's book and Robert Bruce's book. There's Sylvia Jacobs' book, and this one, the one on the right, is by Kensho. That's what he calls himself. And I just got through reading this. This is a fairly new book. And Kensho not only experienced the Akashic records, he explains, how to do it, or he tries to explain how to do it. And he says it's different from normal astral projection. Your body is kind of half asleep, half awake. And he described the Akashic records as kind of an enormous open-air library. And he has some very wonderful, colorful, artistic recreations of what he's seen in his book. I don't agree with everything that Kensho says, but he's got some great pictures. And this is a picture that an artist did, a rendition of the Akashic records, and he described it as open air. He said he found himself in the Akashic records. It was this enormous library. He saw a bunch of people sitting at desks staring into books. And so he asked the guy closest to him, "Where am I?" The guy looked up and said, "You're in the Akashic records."
Wow.
And he said, "Okay." He left and he walked up a staircase to the second floor, found a book, and he looked at the title. On the book it said, "Your past life as an elemental." And he opened it, and as he opened the book, he was drawn inside the experience, and he experienced his past life as an elemental. Take that for whatever you want to. I'm not sure how much to read into that, but that was Kensho's experience. And so he actually looked at this book, whatever. Okay, but here's the deal. The Akashic records, right? Where have I heard that term before? That guy, Edgar Cayce, okay? So how did Edgar Cayce do it? He did, he relaxed. Usually he's laid out on a couch or something like that, and he self-induced a deep trance. It was similar to self-hypnosis, and they called him the sleeping prophet, and he dissociated from his physical body, and he had somehow acquired access to the Akashic records. Well, strangely enough, Edgar Cayce doesn't say much about the astral projection. If you go through the different readings and things, and all of his files, there aren't very many things said about astral projection at all, which is very strange. However, the good news is, in 1933, Edgar Cayce gave a lecture in Norfolk, Virginia, and he said the following. I'll read it to you. When giving a life reading, I see myself as a tiny dot out of my physical body, which lies inert before me. I find myself oppressed by darkness, and there's a feeling of terrific loneliness. Suddenly, and he goes on to say, suddenly I'm conscious of a white beam of light. As this tiny dot, I move upward, following the light, knowing that I must follow it or be lost. He goes on to say, as I move along this path of light, I gradually become conscious of various levels upon which there is movement. Upon the first levels, there are vague, horrible shapes, grotesque forms such as one sees in nightmares. Then he goes on to describe wonderful cities where there's a pervasive music, the most beautiful music he's ever heard, cities with beings of light and fantastic things you can't describe. A little later on, he says, quite suddenly, I come upon a hall of records. It's a hall without walls, without a ceiling, but I'm conscious of seeing an old man who hands me a large book, a record of the individual for whom I seek information. Okay, this is from the book Edgar Cayce's Story of Jesus by Jeffrey First. So, was Edgar Cayce astral projecting? I mean, at first glance, there's a lot of similarities here, right? A lot of similarities. Edgar Cayce talked about you find myself oppressed by darkness. a lot of astral projectors describe what they call the void, and this is a place of total darkness where it's like you're in the middle of deep space, only there aren't any stars. And it's a great jumping off place to get to other places. So it's like they'll refocus themselves to the void, and then from the void they'll go elsewhere. A lot of astral projectors talk about subplanes of the astral, or other dimensions, other levels. And Edgar Cayce mentioned levels. The astral projectors talk about the lower astral having what author Robert Bruce calls astral wildlife, which is unsavory creatures and weird-looking things. And Edgar Cayce talked about horrible shapes and with the grotesque forms. So very similar on the lower astral, right? And astral projectors also talk about cities that are pervaded with music and cities and light beings and the same kind of thing. So there's a lot, at first glance, there's a lot of similarities here with what Edgar Cayce did to an astral projection, even though he didn't say much about it himself. Now at this point, I thought, I should go, I'm a computer guy, right? I've been doing computers for over 40 years. And I thought at this point, the latest and greatest thing is artificial intelligence, right? AI. So I thought I'd go out just for the fun of it. This morning I went out to some AI engines, and I told the AI engines to generate a picture of Edgar Cayce flying out of body. So I thought these are so hilarious, I thought I'd share them with you. I just had to share them with you. So this is the first one. This is the first one from Microsoft Bing. And if you know me, you know I'm not a fan of Microsoft or Apple. I'm a Linux guy. So I don't like Microsoft, I don't like Bing. This guy doesn't even look like Edgar Cayce, but here's another one that it generated. I love the look on his face. So I switched from Bing, from Microsoft Bing, to another AI that's called Dream Studio, and I put in the same parameters, Edgar Cayce flying out of body. And this is the first At least this one looks like him. The Bing didn't have a clue, right? This is the second attempt. And I love to look at it on his face. He's like, there's an airplane coming at me, but I got this. And this is the third attempt. I love the look on his face. And he looks like, who the hell summoned me here, and who have I got to reprimand? This is just not acceptable. I'm busy here. I'm out in the astral plane doing my work. You can't do that to me. And look at his left hand. He's got 5 fingers and a thumb. So I thought that was hilarious. And then I tried one more, which was recommended to me, called Leonardo AI, and that one actually is a little bit better. It actually looks like him flying, there's airplanes and stuff below him. But I thought that I thought I had to share those with you. Wow. So what's different about what Edgar Cayce did and astral projectors? Okay, most astral projectors, their body is in sleep paralysis, and Edgar Cayce wasn't really. He was able to talk during his readings and things like that, kind of in a hypnotic state. But the question then becomes, is there precedence for talking in an out-of-body experience? Well, here are 3 psychics that could talk during their out-of-body experiences. 3 psychics who were studied by scientists, very serious scientists in the 1970s. First one I want to talk about is Stuart A.R.E, whose nickname was Blue. They did, all these psychics, they did extensive experiments on, scientific experiments. But one of the most notable experiments with A.R.E is they told him to travel out of his body and go visit a particular room where there was a snake in a cage. This snake routinely, slithered around the perimeter of his cage at regular intervals, and they were able to measure how often the snake did that. When A.R.E supposedly went into the room and in his astral body, in his non-physical body, the snake reared up and started biting at the mid-air. Okay? So it's like somehow that snake perceived him there. Okay? The scientists thought, well, that's interesting. They did another experiment. A.R.E had just acquired a pet kitten, and he named it Spirit, which Kathy and I named our dog Spirit. So I thought it was a great name for a pet. But Harari's cat was named Spirit, and the scientists set up microphones in his apartment, and they measured the number of meows per hour on this cat. Okay, and then they said, okay, Blue, go home, and, out of your body, travel out of body, go home, and go interact with your cat, Spirit. And so what happened is the cat suddenly went quiet, and Harari was there for like 20 minutes, and the cat went like dead silent. So no meows, and then as soon as Harari left, he began meowing at the same rate he was prior to him being there. So it's like the cat suddenly was comforted by the presence of Harari out of body. Another more interesting case is Ingo Swann. He is a remarkable psychic, or he was, I think he's now passed. But he was a student at the time, and they did scientific experiments on him with the physics department. And so, for example, they set up thermistors, which is a big digital thermometer, and they would put it in like a thermos, and they would insulate it, and they'd bury it underground, and they'd say, okay, and go down, leave your body, go down there, and make the temperature go up. And the temperature would go up. And then they'd say, make the temperature go down, and the temperature would go down. And he did this several times for them, and the statistics were really pretty good. There was a strong correlation between when they told him to make the temperature hotter, and it was hotter, and lower when it was lower, when they told him to do that. They also experimented with magnetometers, which is a scientific device to measure magnetic fields. And they said, okay, Harari, see if you can make this magnetometer go off. And they'd have it in, again, electromagnetically sealed chamber at the physics lab, and the dang thing went off. And he was able to make the magnetometer go off. And it's like, well, how in the heck is this happening? They also did that with a quark detector, where the physics department was trying to study subatomic particles. And so they had these quark detectors buried, 12 feet underground, encased in cement and everything. Now we got you. He was able to affect the quark detector as well. The third psychic I want to talk about is Alex Tannis. And what's remarkable about Alex Tannis, they did several things with him, but they wanted to say, okay, well, are these guys like Ingo Swann and Blue Harari, are they just remote viewing? Just remote viewing. Or is there something really out of his physical body? So they created what they called an illusion box. This is a box that the parapsychologist made. It had lights and dials and color wheels and different lights and mirrors and things like that, such that you would only be able to see it if you were physically there. If you were remote viewing this thing, you would see a box, you'd see the dials, you'd see the lights, whatever, and you'd describe it that way. But if you actually saw a blue, clipper, or a ship, sailing vessel, something like that, and it was blue, and you had to be looking through the window at the right angle at the right time, and he was able to do that. And not only that, but he would say, okay, they'd say, okay, what are you seeing? And he'd say stuff like, oh, hang on, I got to get up a little bit higher. I don't have the angle quite right. And he would adjust his, I got to get higher, and he'd be up higher, and he'd look through the window, okay, now I see it. And he would do that kind of thing. And a lot of these cases are found in multiple books, scientific books. These are just two examples here. Out-of-Body Experiences by Janet Mitchell. Great book, I highly recommend it. And I think when I bought it for my collection, I had to write to the editor. It was out of print. I had to write to the editor, and much to my surprise, they procured a signed copy for me. So it was signed by Janet Mitchell. It's one of the very few books that I have that are signed by the author. And now I'm just bragging. In 2018, there was an SSE A.R.E conference in Las Vegas. SSE is the Society for Scientific Exploration, and it's basically a bunch of science nerds who study psychics. That's all they do. They study mediums, they study astrology, they make correlations, they present scientific papers and they publish like real scientists. IRVA is the International Remote Viewers Association. Anyway, Dr. Janet Mitchell was one of the people who did scientific experiments, laboratory experiments on some of these guys, like Blue A.R.E. and Ingo Swann. She talked about Ingo Swann. She was one of the guest speakers, and I got a picture of her. I'm very proud of that. And what these scientists were trying to do is answer the question, are they real? Are out-of-body experiences real? If you're interested in that question, it's kind of beyond the scope of today's talk. I could do another 3-hour talk on that topic, because there's a lot of evidence. But I recommend to you a book, Consciousness Beyond the Body by Alexander Defoe. And he collected all the information, as much scientific evidence as he could find. And he got this from a lot of experts in the field. And I'm proud to say I contributed a chapter to his book. So one of the chapters in there is mine. And he goes over a lot of evidence. Now this book is not available in print. It's only available as an ebook. So you can buy it for your Kindle, for your iPad, whatever. The cost is $0. It's free. So go out to Amazon.com and download it and read it. It's got some great information. It's a little bit dated because it was probably 10 years ago, but it's still some very interesting information. The book on the right here is just another example, The Out-of-Body Experience by Rodrigo Montenegro, and it's a collection of various experiences. One of my favorite stories comes from this book. It's a guy, and you know, some of you may have heard this story before. A guy in the book, he leaves his physical body, he travels, and he says, oh great, I'm out of body, now I can obtain proof to make sure this thing is real. I'm really seeing the real world out there. And so he travels out of body and he goes down to the parking lot and he says, I'm gonna find my own car and verify and where it's parked and everything else. I'll go out and find my car. And he goes out to the parking lot and he can't find his car. And it's like, no, this car is white, that's not mine. Now, where did I leave that car? No, that one's white too. And pretty soon he looks around and it's like, they're all white. And he's like, this is all crap, I must be hallucinating, they can't all be white. So he goes back into his body, back into his physical body, and he's all depressed, and he looks out the window, and they see something like this. Okay, so it had snowed, and he didn't know it had snowed, and that's why all the cars were white. So the question now becomes, and I get this question a lot, why would you want to do astral projection? Is it to be like Edgar Cayce? For one thing, it's fun. There's a thrill of flying, and I was talking to you about flying and how much fun that is. It's one thing to fly untethered, in a plane, but not, to not even have a physical body and to be able to have that freedom is just amazing. And finding your own answers, but it gets better. Forget space, the final frontier. It's not space. Consciousness is the final frontier. You can explore strange new worlds, for sure. You can seek out new life and new civilizations. You can boldly go where almost no one has gone before. Is there precedence for exploring space in the out-of-body state? Actually, there is. Ingo Swann, on April 27th, 1973, the scientists asked Ingo Swann, leave your body, travel to the planet Jupiter and describe what you see. He described a bunch of things, but he described rings around the planet Jupiter. And of course, he was scoffed at by scientists. It was ridiculous, right? Saturn had rings, Jupiter didn't have rings. But guess what? In 1979, 6 years later, NASA's Voyager 1 spacecraft flew by Jupiter and verified, yes, there are in fact some faint rings around the planet. So he was exonerated or vindicated or whatever you want to say. But it gets better. Edgar Cayce predicted the stock market crash of 1929. He recommended that his friends get out of the stock market before it was too late. Some of them even sold all their stocks, and then they got so itchy they went back into the market, and then it did crash, and they lost their fortunes. So time travel. A lot of people say you can time travel in astral projection. Is there precedence for that? Absolutely. In 1999, an astral projection teacher by the name of Graham Nichols, who teaches, he lives in London, and he was teaching a class on out-of-body experience, and his book he's got a couple books, but he went into the out-of-body state kind of by accident. I mean, as a teacher, you probably shouldn't be doing it yourself, you're teaching it. But he had an out-of-body experience during the class in which he saw everything looked normal, but there was everything was pervaded by a strange bluish light. And unlike all of his other out-of-body experiences, and he has had many, and he found himself in the bottom, in the tube, what they call the tube, the subway in London. And then he saw a bomb go off, and it scared the crap out of him, and he was in shock and all nervous and all of this stuff. 5 days later, a bomb went off at that same tube station in London. And it was one of the few, there was a few what they called nail bombings in London. But he saw it. And since then, he's had a couple other instances of precognition during an out-of-body experience. And it was always with a blue light to the atmosphere for whatever reason. But it gets better. Why do astral projection? How about to explore the afterlife? Eliminate your fear of death. Someday we're all going to find ourselves there anyway, and the more prepared we can be, the better off we are. Is there precedence for that? Absolutely. There are several explorers of the afterlife. My favorite happens to be Jürgen Zive, which is, he wrote several books. The first and best, I think, is Multidimensional Man. Jürgen wrote about, he would leave his body, but he wasn't trying to leave his body. He was trying to achieve transcendence. He was trying to achieve oneness with God, nirvana, whatever you want to call it. He wanted oneness with God, but he kept failing and instead find himself out of body. So in the out-of-body state, he would find himself in a strange city. He would meet the inhabitants. He'd talk to them and find out whatever. And this book, Multidimensional Man, he describes a lot of those experiences, and it's fascinating. Highly recommend it. One of the experiences he has in there, he actually does have a oneness experience where he attains briefly oneness with God and everything else. And it's the only out-of-body experience book I've ever read that has brought me to tears, literally, reading it. And the book I'm reading right now is Cyrus Kirkpatrick's book, The Afterlife and Beyond, the examinations of life after death as an out-of-body explorer, or by an out-of-body explorer. But it gets better. How about seeing loved ones who have passed on? Last goodbyes, being able to say one last goodbye for those loved ones who've gone before us. This is, by the way, this is a famous painting called First Day in Heaven. And is there precedence for that? Absolutely. William Buhlman has described encounters that have passed on loved ones. Michael Ross is one of my favorite. It's a smallish book, but his son, Michael Ross's son, committed suicide. And Michael Ross was able to contact him in the afterlife in an out-of-body state, and they said final goodbyes, and he explained to him what was going on and all of that, and his current state, and that he was feeling better and all of this. Many other books talk about last goodbyes as well. I personally have seen my father and my mother both in an out-of-body experience, not at the same time, and Jürgen Zive as well. But it gets better. You can meet angels, guides, masters, ascended beings firsthand. Is there precedence for that? Absolutely. I've met these guys. I believe it's the basis for what they call an angel in the Bible. To me, they look like giant 7-foot-tall lantern filaments, like you see here. I mean, they're this really bright, and they're usually hanging up a couple feet in the air, and they're usually behind me. And I've talked about this. Someday I'm going to write a book about my encounters. with them, but I've had experiences, for example, I've used this before, where I will suddenly become conscious and I'll see these beings around me, and they're like these big beings or whatever, and I hear a disembodied voice saying, well, crap, he's conscious again. And the other one says, well, put him back under. We're time's slipping away. We got to get to this. Okay, and then boom, lights out. I don't remember anything after that. And this has happened multiple times. So I know these creatures are out there. They've got their own agenda. To them, we are primates. We are ants. We're toys. We're tools in their hand. They do God's work, whatever you want to call it. They do spiritual work, and they sometimes use us as tools. And that's what I think was happening. But wait, it gets better. How about astral projection to meet Jesus Christ? Is there precedence for that? Absolutely, yeah. There are several, like Carol Abby's book, Vincent Field, and Marilyn Hughes has written several books. I don't know how many she's up to, 20 books maybe, about her out-of-body experiences. She's very Christian, and she's had several experiences in which she's met and seen Jesus Christ. I myself had an experience where I felt as if I was in the presence of Jesus, but let me tell you, there's nothing that ends an out-of-body experience quicker than strong emotion. And when I felt I was in the presence of Christ, I was like overwhelmed, overcome with emotion, and that ended the experience almost before it started. So I was like, 2 seconds or 3 seconds. It was incredible, but it was real. It was there. But it gets better. What about meeting God? Okay, is there precedence for that? And I love this meme. Right? Organized religion doesn't want you to meet God because they want to be the intermediary and they want to pass the plate, right? Is there precedence? Absolutely. In my second book, Lessons Out of the Body, I describe an experience by a guy I know whose name is Chris Hazlitt, and he had this, I don't remember if it was a near-death experience or a regular out-of-body experience, but he had an experience in which he described this enormous being that he perceived as a sun of awareness. And he said it was like the sun. It was very bright, and you couldn't look at it. It was almost so bright, but it didn't hurt your eyes. And he realized at that point that he had done nothing with his life, and he was so ashamed at having done nothing. And he wasn't necessarily a bad person, but he felt ashamed of who he was, and he should have done more with his life. And so he tried to run away from God. And the farther he ran, and the more he ran and ran for miles and miles and miles trying to fly away. And he'd stop and look behind him, and God was still right there. And he said, and he told me, no matter how far you run, you can't get away from God. It's still there. And it's really quite an incredible experience. It's the only experience in my out-of-body books that's not my own. There have been other cases like Eben Alexander, who had a near-death experience, and what's amazing about Alexander is that his brain, his neocortex, completely shut down, and that's what scientists tell us is the seat of experience. Without the neocortex running in the brain, you can't experience anything. Well, guess what? He did experience a lot, and it's a good book. Gary Wimmer, and there's a lot of other NDE books that are fascinating in that regard too. I also, in my first book, Out of Body Experiences, How to Have Them and What to Expect, I talk about a childhood experience in which it seemed as if I was brought before God and they were going to take me away, and God asked me, well, and I said, no, it's going to make my mom and dad too sad if I leave. And just, and they said, well, why do you want to go back down there? And I said, well, I got to tell everyone that it's not painful, and it's actually, death is a nice experience. And they seemed to accept that answer, and I was brought back to earth. But that was a childhood experience. I don't remember it very well. Later in life, when I became more proficient at out-of-body experiences, I did a bunch of experiments that I called Chasing God. And I would induce an out-of-body experience, and I would try to contact God directly. And I never did have that experience of God directly, but I had some very interesting results as the result of those experiments. What about transcendence? Is there precedence for that? That is transcending time and space and everything else and becoming one with everything. Absolutely, there's precedence for that. Again, Jürgen Zive, his book, like I said, he wasn't trying to induce out-of-body experiences. They just kind of was a byproduct of his trying to have one of these transcendent experiences, and he finally got there. Mary Dioma, she makes a lot of the near-death experience circles, even though her experience was not near-death, it was just an out-of-body experience. I think the best reasons for out-of-body experience is because we can maybe agree on what the afterlife is like. All our beliefs are based on the afterlife are based from other people's out-of-body experiences, right? If we could agree, if science could agree what this is and where this is, we could end religious differences. We could have a unification of religions, right? You wouldn't have to have, Muslim hell versus Christian hell versus Buddhist hell versus whatever. We could all agree, and maybe agree with a basis of science on what's really out there, where we're going when we die, and all of that. No more holy wars. But I have to, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you about the downsides. There are some downsides. For one thing, your belief system may be thrown into chaos like it was mine. You might find yourself an outcast from religion and science like I did. You may confront your deepest fears, which is the fear of death and fear of the unknown, because when you leave your body and you're looking at the body lying on the bed, it's pretty realistic, and it's like you're confronting your own death right there. I mean, it's like, geez, what if I don't get back? So it's very sobering. And if you can leave your body, what else is out there that you're not, familiar with, whatever? So anyway, you're confronting those fears, but there's really nothing to fear. It's also harder to relate to ordinary people. I love this cartoon. I'll read it to you. It says, "Man, Johnny hasn't been the same since he developed otherworldly powers." Oh, hey, Johnny. They see Johnny. Oh, hey, Johnny. So, you seen any good movies lately? And Johnny says, "I've seen the fabric of space-time collapse into the infinite void with the force of 1,000 suns." And so they pause, not sure what to say, and then they say, "Oh, so no then." But I mean, the struggle is real, right? You may lose friends, right? You had a spiritual awakening, you lost all your friends, all your relatives called you crazy. Great, welcome to paradise. Yeah. And what's important to you may change from what's important to other people. You start to value experiences more than things. When you leave your body, you realize that things are pretty much meaningless, and your experiences are the only thing you're going to take with you to the grave. And so, other people are not going to care. To you, an out-of-body experience may seem like a revelation. This guy, hey, I can leave my body. Hey, everyone, this guy can leave his body. See, nobody cares. And congratulations, now you're a weirdo. And this one says, "The universe will bless you with the gift of esoteric spiritual knowledge, but no one you know will believe a damn word of it." Okay, so getting back to serious again. Edgar Cayce once said, "You can only grow if you're willing to feel awkward and uncomfortable when you try something new," right? And that's what this is. It's awkward, it's uncomfortable, and it's definitely growth. And in my world, when it comes to the otherworldly, personal experience always trumps faith, right? You can have all the faith you want in God or angels or whatever, but it's a whole nother level to experience them firsthand and to know what's out there for real, to really know that there's an afterlife and all of that. I only have two heroes. I've mentioned this a couple times to different people, my wife. My two heroes are Leonardo da Vinci and Charles Tart. Charles Tart did scientific laboratory experiments on Robert Monroe. And Da Vinci, here's a quote from him: "For once you've tasted flight, you will walk the earth with your eyes turned skywards, for there you've been, and there you will long to return." And I really like that quote from Da Vinci. It was his dream to fly, and he never did, but he tried to invent flying machines way back when. So now I got to ask a question. This is kind of the Edgar Cayce Study group. So would you rather study Edgar Cayce, or would you rather do what Edgar Cayce did? Okay, so it's kind of like asking, would you rather study Mozart or do what Mozart did, right? It's not a fair question. Edgar Cayce, like Mozart, was a prodigy. And being a musician doesn't make you a Mozart, but it gives you the tools. It puts the tools in your hands. Likewise, astral projection doesn't lead you to heaven or give you God, but it does give you the tools. And you got to do what you can with those tools, what you see fit. Now, this is an election year, and everybody's talking about a blue wave or a red wave in November. What I would like to talk about is a consciousness wave. I'm a moderator and member of several Facebook groups about astral projection, the biggest of which is called Astral Projection Techniques. And this is just a snapshot in time from March 7th of this last month to April 4th. There were 10,894 membership requests, and roughly half of those are approved. As of today, I checked earlier today, and there were 114,543 members of this group. And this group is highly vetted, so if you start spouting off and telling people, rubbish or recommending drugs and things like that, you get booted. You'll get booted within an hour, because there are like a dozen or more different moderators for this group, and they're all really good, and they're all watching. But a lot of good information on the group. I'll end with a couple memes. People ask me how this astral projection has affected our marriage. I love this meme, newlyweds. Now that we're married, you should stop astral projecting. You're beginning to sound like my ex-wife. What? You never told me you'd been married before. I haven't been. Okay, but now Kathy and I have been married for 32 years, so after 32 years, I'm going to another dimension. You need anything? She kind of accepts me and loves me for who I am. So anyway, these are the books that I've written. The 4 non-fiction books that I've written. Out-of-Body Experiences is my first one, and my latest is Hacking the Out-of-Body Experience. People ask me, if I want to get into this, which one should I start with? And I usually recommend the first book. It's old now, it's dated, it's like 25 years old. But it's also been the most popular, I think, and it's been translated into several languages. So it's available in German and Japanese and Russian and, a couple Baltic languages. So that's the one I recommend, because it explains how I got into it and what I actually experienced. You'll get to see what actually happened to me and all of that. The other one, Hacking the Out-of-Body Experience, is more about techniques and different means to get you out of body. And I'm going to leave you now with a quote from Edgar Cayce. Love is the universal truth that allows us to transcend the boundaries of time and space. And I really like that. That's Edgar Cayce, and there's some truth to that. And that's my presentation. And at this point, I'd like to invite questions. I've got some contact information.
First, let's applaud just in case.
Hopefully I didn't bore you and was too long, but anyway, I'm a northerner, so I talk fast. So questions, yes?
Okay, I'm a northerner too.
Okay.
So, before I was 10, I would dream that I was in my backyard touching the leaves of the trees. Is that astral projection, do you think? I was asleep.
Well, it depends on if you were conscious at the time. If you were conscious and aware of being out of your body, then it could have been.
I'm not sure. Like I said, it was, but one time I was homesick from school. And my classmates swore, and my teacher swore they saw me.
Yep.
And I got frightened, and then they said I just took off. But I was home with a fever.
There have been multiple cases where people have traveled out of body and have been seen by other people. There's a lot of interesting information out there. I just wish I had 2 or 3 more lectures that I could give on some of these more fascinating corner cases. Yes?
When you began, you said, I don't know if it was your first experience, but you split into 5.
Yeah.
What does that mean? You had 5 different experiences, or 5, what does that mean?
Okay, she wants to know on my first real out-of-body experience, I was split into 5, and she wants to know more details about that. Actually, what happened is I was aware of being 5 different me's at the same time. I was 5 distinct personalities, 5 distinct and unique personalities at the same time. And it was almost like I was sitting in a circle with a bunch of 4 other of myself. And we were arguing about a computer program, because I had been programming all day. And I was programming all day long, and and this was a space war game I was developing. This is in 1980 or 1979, right? So I was developing a space war game, and one of me said, well, I think we should work on the remote controlled robots that are in the game. Another me said, no, we got to give it more interaction. And a third me said, no, you guys are both wrong. We should be concentrating on allowing people to communicate with each other in the game. I mean, this went on. And I was trying to follow the conversation of me. One of me was trying to follow the conversation. And I was kind of going like, you said this, you said that, and it sped up. And it sped up faster and faster, and pretty soon it was like a tape on rewind that was, or fast forward. I couldn't keep up with it. It went too fast. And then all of a sudden, boom, there was this kind of a pop, and my consciousness was completely integrated again. I was one person again, and I could think clearly. And then I felt I was separate from my physical body, but I didn't know what to do. Nobody said what to do next, right? How do you get out of that physical body? And so I tried to climb out of my chest, and it was like the barrier. My physical body was like a barrier of energy. I couldn't claw my way through it. I was trying to claw my way through my own stomach of my physical body, and I tried several attempts, couldn't get out, and finally I laid it back in my body, and I lifted my feet and did a backward somersault, and I peeled off the body, and I found myself floating above it. And then I looked at the ceiling, it's like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then just looking at the ceiling, I floated up to the ceiling, up to the top, and then I looked down at my body, and it's like, holy crap, I'm a long way up here. What if I fall? And just that quick, boom, back into my body, right? And then I replayed it in my, came to it, physically, and replayed it in my mind. It's like, holy crap, I'm not crazy, I'm not crazy thing. And then I finally calmed down and went back to sleep, because it was like 3 or something in the morning, 2:45 or 3 in the morning, something like that. And I went back to sleep, and the conversation, the computer conversation started up again. It's like, I know what's going on, and I became conscious immediately, and boom, I was out of my body. But this time I was more cautious. So I lifted my arms, and it's like, well, they look pretty normal and real. I guess I'm physical. I'm not having an out-of-body experience at all. And then I tried to lower my arms, and they were caught in some kind of force field. It's like I couldn't move them anymore, and so I'm starting to panic, And finally, I threw everything I had at it, and was forced my astral arms back down into my physical arms, and then I came back out of body. It's like, holy crap! So anyway, it was a very vivid experience, but yeah, I was split 5 ways, and each one was uniquely me, and it was just very strange. So, yeah.
I have a question, but I want to say quick on your 5 selves, that fits perfect with the quantum physics, that we all have many alternate realities of ourselves, and so maybe you met them.
Yeah, maybe quantum physics is starting to catch up with astral projectors.
Yeah. My other question is, what about people who, well, this was me, who yet, when I was young, about was your age you were when you first started doing it. I didn't know about it and I didn't want it to happen, but it was happening, so then I had to search out to see what it is.
Mhm.
And I found some books, but then it never happened again. So what makes it happen to people who don't want it to happen?
Actually, conservative estimates are that 20% of everyone out there has had an out-of-body experience in their life. 20%. But almost all of them are one-shot deal. Almost everyone's had one single out-of-body experience. So it's kind of rare to have more than one. But yeah, a lot of times they happen to people one time, and a lot of times it's when they're young, and they're 18, 19, 20, that age bracket, and then they, for whatever reason, it's like they grow out of it. But there's a lot of science behind it as well. There's a lot of things to consider, like, for example, people who play video games are a lot more susceptible to having out-of-body experience. Because you're training your brain to accept a different story of experience of what's happening to you. You're focusing on what's happening in the game. And likewise with virtual reality, I think. But also people who lie on their back are more susceptible to out-of-body experience than people who lie on their sides. There's a lot of science. There's a whole, there's a lot of stuff to consider. Mike, yeah.
Do you feel that this experience relates at all to past lives or reincarnation?
Do I feel that the experience relates at all to past lives and reincarnation? Not so much. I mean, I've read almost all of those books. I've got, 200 and probably about 250 books. And by the way, on my website here, I've got a blog, and I've got about 130 book reviews of astral projection books where I've read them and analyzed them and wrote about what's in them. So before you buy any books on out-of-body, read my book reviews to see if I've done a book review. But to answer your question, not many books on the subject talk about past lives and how it relates to out-of-body. I certainly haven't had an out-of-body in which I had a past life. I mentioned Kensho's book in which he had the Akashic Records experience of a past life. I did have a weird experience of my own related to past lives. This is a long time ago, and what happened is I was young and I had a dream, and in this dream I dreamed I was with my brother Joe, and we were young kids, and we were in an apartment, and we were reminiscing about, the guy who used to take care of us when we were young, and it never happened. It was a past life as far as I can tell. My mom never used to take us to this man, but I've got clear what seemed to be past life memories of it. Now, I did not acquire that through an out-of-body experience. What it seemed like this dream of this conversation with my brother kind of unlocked the past life memory, and suddenly I got this memory of these things having happened, which is really kind of weird, but that wasn't precipitated by an OBE. Yeah?
That's what I was wondering, because I think I heard that maybe if you dreamt something, it was something that really happened before or would happen. And what I had was a weird dream that I'm sure would never happen. It was like I died and I was laid out in a cave somewhere, and I was watching to see who would bother to come to see me, in the cave. And it was just curiosity, I was just feeling curious. Like, I really that would never happen.
Well, yeah, dreams a lot of times are okay, so I've got a couple other, let me see, I've got a slide here. I believe that there are 4 out-of-body states, and upper right is an out-of-body experience in which you are conscious and you seem to be experiencing an objective world. It may or may not be related to this physical world, but it's objective. In a regular dream, it's on the other quadrant where you're unconscious, but it seems to be a subjective world. So it's basically a hallucination. So anything can happen. A lot of times, what we experience in dreams are the manifestations of subconscious fears, worries, and other concerns of life. And so it may or may not be from that. In the upper left quadrant, we have a lucid dream, which is a dream in which you're completely conscious and you're aware that you're dreaming. You know you're dreaming, But you're basically, you're